In this week's parsha, we have the dinim of the tumah of a zov, a person that had a particular type of discharge. And the pasuk says, "Ukli cheres," an earthenware vessel, asher yiga bayazov, that the zov came in contact with, needs to be broken. And a wooden vessel can be toiveled in the water. The Torah's koyanim on these words, asher yiga bayazov, that the zov came in contact with, explains, Yachal, you might think that it means even if he just physically, literally just touched the vessel from the outside, then it becomes Tomei. So the Torah's Koyanim goes on and explains that it cannot be the case. The Torah's Koyanim gives us a Gzeira Shava from where we learn out that just coming in contact with the earthenware vessel would not make it Tomei. And rather, Asher Yiga Boy Hazov, what it does mean is that the Zov actually moved the vessel, then it becomes Tomei. Now Rashi, also on these words, Ukli cheres asher yiga boy hazov, sends us to this Torah's Koyanim, quotes the Torah's Koyanim, but Rashi only brings a very little part of the Torah's Koyanim, only the very beginning and the very end. Rashi says, Yachol, you might think, even if he just touched it from the outside, then Rashi says, V'chulu, etc., as it says in Torah's Koyanim, and then Rashi finishes off with a point that in our case, what it would mean is moving the actual vessel. Now, the reason why Rashi has to tell us anything at all, why Rashi can't just say that touching the vessel means simply touching it, why does Rashi have to say that it means moving it? So the issue over here is that we know already from an earlier place in the Torah, when it was dealing with the tumah of shrotzim, of the dead, creeping, crawling animals, is that the tumah of a sheretz does not make a earthenware vessel Tomei just by coming in contact with it. It had to go inside the ear space of that vessel. And therefore, when we come to the earthenware vessel in our case, we need to know, what does Yiga Boy mean? Because you might say over here also that it wouldn't mean just simply touching it. On the other hand, you could also come along and say a Zov is a stricter tumah than the sheretz. So Rashi explains to us that it does not mean simply touching it. Rather, it does mean that he had to move the vessel. Now, Rashi doesn't actually tell us and give us the proof that the Torah's Koyanim gives, which I said before, the Torah's Koyanim learns it from a Gzeira Shava. Rashi just gives it to us as a statement. So the question over here is why? Rashi does not quote the full Torah's Koyanim. He just says, you might think that even if you touch it, and then he says, no. He says just v'chulu, etc., as it says in Torah's Koyanim, and finally he tells us that touching over here means moving it. So seemingly, either Rashi should have quoted the whole Torah's Koyanim, also the proof, or he shouldn't have quoted anything at all. Now, you might say that the reason why he quotes the very, very end is because Rashi does want to tell us what Yiga Boy in our case means. Touching it means moving it. But the problem with that is that Rashi still had to give us the proof of why it cannot mean in our case just simply touching the vessel. So somehow we must say that Rashi's proof is not the same way as the Medrash, which learns it out from a Gzeira Shava, which this is something the Ben Chamish Lemikra would never be able to figure out on his own, but rather somehow from the words that Rashi does bring, this itself is enough to explain to us why we cannot say that Yiga Boy simply means touching it. So where do we know that Yiga Boy cannot mean touching it, rather moving it? And this is what our Sikha is going to be about, exploring different options. So you might say that we could learn it from Tumas Meis. This is generally considered the strictest Tumah of a dead body. And yet, in that Tumah as well, an earthenware vessel would not become Tomei just by the Tmei Meis touching it from the outside. And therefore, maybe over here we could say, then surely by a Zov, it cannot mean that he's just touching the vessel from the outside. And therefore, Rashi says, it means that he actually moved the vessel. The problem with this is that this unique type of tumah that the Zov has, that when he moves the vessel, it becomes Tomei, even if it wasn't direct contact, but he moved it, that also doesn't apply by Tumas Mes. This is actually something even stricter by the Zov than by Tumas Mes. So if we are anyways saying that Yiga Boy is going to be something over here that's different and more strict than Tumas Mes, then by the same token, it could be that the Zov touching the vessel from the outside makes it Tomei, even though the mace does not. That could be the pshat just as much as saying that by the Zov moving a vessel makes it Tamei, even though that does not apply by a Tumas Meis. And this would be a simpler way of translating Yigaboy, physically touching it from the outside. So we need to look for another reason of why we cannot say Yigaboy means touching it. Maybe we could say it's from the end of the pasuk. The pasuk says V'chol kli eitz yishartu b'mayim, that a wooden vessel is toivled in the mikveh. Now, if our pasuk is teaching us about this new tumas hesed, that when you move something, the Zav moves something, it becomes tamei. I understand why the pasuk also has to tell it to us about wooden vessels, because this is a new din that we're learning, that a wooden vessel can become tamei by the Zav just by being moved, again, even if it's not direct contact. But if the pasuk was telling us about the earthenware vessel, the chiddush of the pasuk would have been that by touching it from the outside, it becomes tamei, different than in other tumois. Then why do we even have to bother bringing anything about the wooden vessel? The wooden vessel is always becoming tamei by it being touched from the outside. The problem with saying that that's Rashi's proof from the end of the pasuk about kol kli eitz, that Rashi should have somehow hinted to this in the Dibur HaMaschil, quoting this part of the pasuk as well in the Dibur HaMaschil. So the Rebbe says the explanation is, when we come to our pasuk, Ukli Cheres Asher Yigaboy Azov, the question really becomes, what is the pasuk even coming to teach us? That a vessel becomes tamei when a person that's tamei came in contact with it? This doesn't seem like any chidush. This is something that we have learned already earlier. We can learn it out from previous things. A person becomes tamei by the zav touching him. Tumah zav is a very strict tumah, as we said before. Obviously, the kalim become tamei. So the question is, what does the pasuk coming to tell us? So we may have thought that the chiddush of our pasuk is that when the zav touches a vessel, even from the outside, the earthenware vessel, even from the outside, it's becoming tamei. Well, that might be the chiddush of our pasuk. And this is what Rashi is saying. Yochel, he's proving from the Toras Koyanim that we could really think that really there is an option that we could have thought based on our pasuk. Yochel afilu nagaboy me'achoriv, even if he touches from the outside. In other words, what he's bringing the Toras Koyanim for was not to bring the proof of the Toras Koyanim, why we cannot say that. It was really to emphasize and highlight this question. Yachel, I might think that that's the pshat in our pasuk, that even if you touch the earthenware vessel from the outside, it becomes tamei. So why don't we say that? So says the Rebbe, in addition to what we said before, that the whole pasuk seems to be an extra pasuk, these particular words, Asher Yigaboy Azov, seem to be completely redundant, because the very previous pasuk was saying V'choil Asher Yigaboy Azov, anything that the zav touches, etc. And then our pasuk repeats again, Ukli Cheres Asher Yigaboy Azov. Why do you need these words that he touches? The previous pasuk was already speaking about things that he's coming in contact with, people that he's coming in contact with. It could have just said, rather, Ukli Cheres Asher Yigaboy Azov, it could have just said, Ukli Cheres, and an earthenware vessel should be broken. Therefore, it makes sense to say that the chidush in our pasuk are those words Asher Yigaboy. There's something unique about these words. The pasuk is trying to tell us that there's a new type of contact, which is not only touching the vessel in one particular place, but Yigaboy, it's as if you touch the whole thing. And this is what Rashi is telling us. What kind of contact is there? That it's as if you touch the whole vessel? That's when you moved the vessel. And those are the words that Rashi brings from the ending of the Toras Koyanim. Ezel Magoy, what is the touch? That's as if you touch the whole thing. That is when you move the vessel. So in other words, to summarize, the main point again is that Rashi's main proof was from the words Asher Yigaboy, Glicheres Asher Yigaboy. And again, because these words seem to be completely extra, and therefore it's teaching us a whole new method of contact that the Zav has with it. The Rebbe says, generally, an earthenware vessel, it's made of earth, is a hint to the person. Adam Yisoidim Yafar, a person comes from dust. And the pasuk in Rashi is coming to teach us that a klicheres, an earthenware vessel, does not become tamei from the outside, from the back. What is that in Avodas Hashem? So the guf, our guf compared to our essence, is just like the back of the person, the outside of the person. Now Hashem made that we need to come on to physical things, to eating, drinking, and other matters of Olam Hazeh. And all of these things that sort of stick on to Achoyrev, to the back of the Keli, to our guf, from these matters of Olam Hazeh, you might think it can make the person tamei. and this is what we say, it can never contaminate the essence of a Yid. This is the way the Eibishter made us. We need these gashmizik things, of course, utilize them in the right ways, but it never schleps down, it never contaminates the Yid. Now that's regarding other tumors. When it comes to the tumor of Ziva, of this particular tumor, you might think it would be different. Why is that? We know there's something called dam nida, the blood of a nida, and that's something natural that the Eibishter made part of the regular cycle. When there's the concept of Ziva, whether it's by a woman or by a man in a different way, but the concept of Ziva is always going to be something that's already not natural. And an avodah that shows that it's not only a person isn't doing the things that he needs based on his physical nature of his nefesh habahamis and his guf, but he's sort of trying to incite the Yetzer Hara and do more things than he needs to be doing, or even in eating and drinking and other matters of Olam Hazeh, doing much more than the necessary. So when a person has fallen down into these things much more than that was just needed based on his nature, we could think maybe now he does become tummy, so to speak, because of the things to do with his guf, me'achoyda from the outside. And this is what we say, that no, any of these things touching the person from the outside never could contaminate the etzem of the Yid, because every single Yid in his etzem, in his very essence, always wants to do only the right thing, only good, and eventually, of course, every Yid will end up saying that I want to do every single mitzvah and be on the right track.